Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to follow the design process of a modern era switching layout set in a port scene. Let's have a look. So we have a lot of material to cover today, so we're going to go through it quickly. Let's have a look at the specs. It's a modern era layout set in a port area, HO scale. The minimum radius is 24 inch. That's already quite tight for these large cars we have nowadays. There were no industry specific requirements, only that there's a variety of cars on the layout. So he's interested in car ferry operations. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And his maximum train length he wanted is 5 cars plus locomotive. We later narrowed this down to 4 cars, as the space we have is only 11 by 15 feet. So let's answer the first burning question. Car ferries in a modern era, does that still exist? In my mind it didn't, but hold and behold, the New York-New Jersey Rail, which started operating in 2006, has a car ferry. So here you see it on Wikipedia. There it is in the background. It has 2 slots for barges. Just note the car types. It's mostly hoppers. This is in the old days. This is what I think of when I think of car ferries. Now we know where it is. Let's have a closer look. Welcome to New York, New York. Here we go. This is the car ferry. This is the image that we saw on Wikipedia as well. Let's just notice a bit how it sits in the land. We have still quite some greenery to fill up the awkward empty spaces. So I want to incorporate that into the layout as well. The car ferry itself just consists of a lot of tracks for storage, for cars to wait to get on the barge, and for the offloading. Here you see the car ferry. This one has 4 tracks. Interesting that the car ferry is actually on the image. Let's just have a look how it sits in the land and what we see here. This is probably some really nice old-time scenes. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's just amazing. Look at that. That must be so hustling and bustling back in the day. We're not going to model this. This is very specific and we don't have that much space, but I just want to point out a few things. You see the track here is still in the middle of the road, and back in old-time days, here you see the track would bend off into the various buildings. Here's one, here's another one. Track is still there. I don't think they use it anymore. Here's another one as well. And here we go. Here's another track bends off to the building here. Here's another track that bends off into the building here. So you see, if you zoom out of it, in modern days, it's just a lot of warehouses and a lot of non-specific buildings. So let's just zoom in a bit and see what this looks like. Here's the street view. Here you see the track goes into the building. Funny how the doorway or the opening is still there. And it's just a generic sunset storage, whatever. Oh, there's the cops. Let's look out. Let's zoom back out quickly. That's all I wanted to show on the satellite. So let's have a quick look at the space itself. There's a door here on the south side. There's 2 nice small windows on the north side. And then there's a electricity box on the bottom side that has to remain accessible at all times. The next step now is just to plot in different benchwork sizes and configurations of layouts to see what works best. So here's variant number 1. I don't want to go too much into detail. Here's variant number 2. What I like to do as well is plot in the minimum radiuses just to see what kind of space is left over. So here it would come in from the bottom of this shelf or the front side. As you see, it ends here and there's not a lot of space left at all. Here it would come in for the top, for example, and you see there's a little bit more space. You have about 3 feet. But here comes the kicker. This is a ruler. This is 1 locomotive and 5 cars. So you see it's actually quite long. And if we would want to put that in here, it wouldn't even fit. And the client quite liked that you could have 1 or 2 people operating in one part of the layout and 1 or 2 in the other part of the layout. And there is this walk-in design. There's a opening on the left, and there's a variant with an opening on the right. So those are the variants. Let's have a look at what we're going to put in track work and what kind of operations do we want. So I initially came up with this design where we have 1 line here in black. In the bottom half, as you see on the right, there would be a small terminal area with some tracks for some classification. And along the line would be some industries, a cluster of industries, and at the end would be 1 or 2 more industries. And on the far right would also be a transfer track to railroad number B. This is a track where you can park and pick up cars that come and go to another railroad that's off of this layout. Then a big feature in this design would be this blue track work, let's call it. This is a totally separate industry, and the black railroad does not have trackage rights on this blue section of track. So it consists of a big industry, that's why it has its own switcher. So then cars would come in from the black, would be set on this little piece of track here, which is a transfer track itself. So the blue industry can pick up the cars from the transfer track and spot them where they need to be spotted. I also intended another transfer track on this blue line to railroad number A. And there's two variants. You can either have the blue switcher switch this transfer track, or you can give trackage rights to the black railroad to actually only pick up and spot cars from this railroad A transfer track. So they would only have right to go from this black section here, across, use this length of track, and then some switches here to get in and out this track and to get the cars and spot the cars there. So it might seem quite complex, but that's the idea, to give you plenty of options and switching down the line. This is not the final design, so let's see what happened. Back to the shapes, we initially chose this E shape, just turned it 90 degrees here, as you see. I just quickly plopped in some track to see how it would more or less all fit in here, and the conclusion was you're not using the longer stretch of the layout most efficiently, because that would be this vertical section, but you need this vertical section more or less to get to all these peninsulas and these sections, so you can't really use it that well. Here the yard could just squeeze in here on the north side. This industry here in the middle just doesn't really seem to work. It does fit, but it just seems very squashed and very compressed, and not the lengthy port scene you would expect. I actually convinced the client to go for this walk-in design. So here's that same design with some ideas drawn into it. Let's just go through the basics. Lots going to change, so I don't want to dive into the details now. But here in the north, in the corner, you see the yard, let's call it the black yard, as from our drawing, where there's a place to classify some tracks. There's a little fuel depot at the end. Here is one car float. This would be the transfer track to railroad number B. And then here you have some more on the right, some more industries. So you come in from this track into here, and this section where my mouse is actually the transfer track to the blue line. The train will then go onto here. And then we go into the blue line that squirms all the way around, all the way back the yard, and then into this section here, this peninsula at the bottom. Peninsula at the bottom, you have one runaround track here. It curves off sharply onto another car float, which is the transfer track to railroad number 8. Then there's an extra industry here, and there's some industry in the north on this blue line as well. So I sent this to the client, and he actually quite liked it, especially like this port section down below and the car ferries, but he wanted more switching and more industries. And also I myself found out that this length here is quite short. It's not enough length to have a lot of switches and parallel tracks here, meaning that this depth is not required. We can make this more shallow. So let's see that now. I also found out that my car floats were far too big, so I made them more accurate. So let's just go through the changes. He wanted more switching, so I added another track here below the fuel station, just for some general offloading. I added another track in the north, one parallel to the industry, and then one track that's a leading, another trailing track with two industries where some cars can be spotted. And I totally reworked this switching area here. So now coming in from the yard, the transfer track, blue transfer track, is this track here, the second one from the right. Cars would be spotted there, and then they would depart through this set of track here. All the other tracks in this area that's not green at the moment are industry tracks. So let's look at the other tracks. There's one track here for industry. This is more or less a lead to get into this track, this little industry spur here. This is a very tight radius, so some speed restrictions would be needed, which is fun. And then you can get into this track here with some industry and some more industries here. Other than that, not much changed. So zooming out a bit, as you see, the scenery is still not drawn into place because this is still not the final design. So now we have to address the access and aisle space situation. We only have 24 inches up here, while there's a lot of action on this side. There is the port that requires some switching, there is a car float, and there's the industry up north, and on top of that there is the yard as well. And on the bottom there's a lot of space, but there's not that much to do. So in the next variant you'll see I actually shifted the entire peninsula down by a good 5 to 7 inches. Let's have a look. So that's the peninsula, it's shifted downwards. Let's have a look at the track again. Not much changed. I did add a dummy track here and dummy track here, just to give it some feeling that it's connected to the other world. So let's have a look at the general track plan. A lot has changed. This is the old one where we have a black line in the south and a blue line in the north, and then we have two transfer tracks to railroad B and railroad A. This is the new situation. Let's just go over it. Starting in the middle, we have the classification / storage tracks here in black. fuel depot at the end, and here's one car ferry to Railroad B. Moving on to the right, we have some industries for switching, and we have that blue transfer track that we've been talking about all along. From the transfer track, you go all the way around all the other trackage to the harbor scene. Here you see the transfer to Railroad A. This is the second car float, and some extra industry tracks there as well. These high over schematics are good to get an idea of what kind of work are we going to be doing. So now the schematics is clear, let's go back to the design. So let's see how this layout will be operated. Let's start in the south with the blue railroad line. The cars will be picked up here from the car float and put on this top track. Then first the locomotive would run around, pick up all these cars and spot them on this industry track, and the industries in the north where appropriate. Then place all the remaining cars back on the north track. At that point, I guess it would go all the way to the transfer track and pick up the cars there and spot those on this middle track, where it would go back to the cars on the north track, spot the ones that need to be spotted on this track here as it is a leading edge, and park all the remaining cars on the transfer track. After which it would go back and spot all the cars basically in reverse order as I just explained, the cars that it picked up from the blue transfer track earlier. Going from the blue transfer track here to the yard area, just follow this line right here. Basically 2.5 tracks for storage. These two are runaround. Then we have fuel depot and an industry on the bottom. The blue line does not have a fuel depot because in modern times the fuel truck just drives up to the locomotive and fuels it on the spot. So going back to the black line, we have a 3-car ferry, quite a lot of cars coming from there. And then we have the industries as discussed earlier here on the right hand side. Having a look at the spots, what you see now are the maximum amount of cars that fit in certain sections of track. It's not said that there's always going to be this amount of cars here on the car ferry. So you just need to take into account a few things. There's 2 spots in this industry here. So this lead track needs to hold 2 cars and a locomotive. Maximum train length is 4, so you need to be able to spot 4 cars on one of these 2 tracks and have a runaround. Here, the maximum capacity for the runaround is 5, which is going to be interesting because there's 6 spots on the car float. So that will require some extra handling. The car float here in the north actually holds a load of cars, 11 to be precise, which is a lot. The yard itself, if completely empty, holds exactly 11 cars. So if the car float would be full, you can at least spot them all there. But that's the last version of the design I sent to the client. I hope it is all clear now how we came from this line diagram all the way to this layout. So that's the design for today. It was quite a complex design. I hope you guys could all follow that. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you want to see more videos just like this. Thank you very much. Bye bye.